Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to do an art journal page and we're going to start with the gesso resist technique. So this stencil is called Calm and it's one of the new ones from TCW, and there is a link in the description box. And I chose it because it has wide open spaces and I thought that would work well with the gesso resist technique. So I'm just going to tape this stencil down. Now I'm working on my 7x10 Canson Mixed Media page, but I have not gessoed it. It is a raw page right now, and that's important if you want gesso resist. And then I'm using the Ranger's blending foam and I'm daubing on white gesso. Now this is also because I'm using the blending foam, it's kind of bubbly and it's adding texture, which is only going to add one more level of interest to my page. Now a word of caution, when you put gesso onto a stencil, you want to wash the stencil off. It tends to adhere a lot more than acrylic paint. So I make sure that I wash it right off the bat. And there you can see the texture that's there. So you want that to dry completely. And now we're ready for step 2, which is going to be to colorize it. And you'll notice right from minute 1, when I start putting on the colors, where the gesso had gone through the stencil, you're seeing a difference. There's that pattern there. So I'm mixing bright aqua and quinacridone magenta with a makeup sponge right on it. And the makeup sponge is a little bit damp just to help the paint blend a little bit easier. And so basically I'm using what I've called the block and blend technique. I'm using wet on wet paint. Both are wet, and where I mix them, I'm making another shade or color, and you get this purple tone. So you got the magenta, the aqua, and then that purple where they blend together. Now this is simply the first or second layer. We're going to add multiple layers on top of this, so don't worry too much if it's not all smooth. And I want to make sure that I'm not blending it too much because I don't want to end up with one tone. I want that variation of colors on the page. Now the gesso resist works because it's kind of turned the page into a non-porous area where the gesso went on. In between, it's darker because that's raw paper and it's soaking into the paper. So you could leave it like this and you have an effect from the gesso resist. It's already shown difference. Or you can grab a baby wipe or wet towel and you start rubbing where the gesso is, and you're taking off the paint because it's not going to adhere. It's not raw paper. Now you can do as little or as much removal to get whatever effect you want. So you could stop here or you could stop. Now I've left this part of the video in real time just so you have an idea of how long it takes to remove. Now I put the color over the whole page and then went back in and removing it. So some of it's been there for longer, maybe a little bit drier, might be a little harder to come off. Now, if you want it to be a little easier, you can spritz with rubbing alcohol onto your cloth, and that will remove it a little bit more. But you're getting that bubbled, and the light comes through. Some of it has absorbed into the gesso and has discolored it a little bit, and I love that look. So I'm hoping that you can see using a stencil like this one with the wide open spaces allows this technique to really show off. If this was a very fine stencil, fine lines, it probably wouldn't be the technique that you would want to use. And I'm just rubbing. I get a clean part of the cloth And I'm just putting pressure with my finger to rub off. Isn't that an amazing stencil? I think off camera I'm spraying on the rubbing alcohol a little bit on there. Yeah, here you go. That's what's in that bottle. There. Now again, you can take off as much as you want. At the time of doing this, I really had no plan for what focal image was on here. I just wanted to experiment with this technique. Recently, I did another video where I used the gesso resist technique, but that time I put it on a stamp, not through a stencil. So you can do both, and I will link that video in the iCards. So once that completely dried, I looked to the focal image, and this looked like Northern Lights to me. So I thought of this Sunrise Tales napkin, which has it's kind of like a bear, and I thought Northern Lights up north. And the colors were very similar, so I chose to use it. I took off the excess plies after I just rough cut it out, and now I'm just gluing it onto a piece of recycled copy paper. And I'm putting the fluid medium underneath and then on top. And while this is drying, I'm going to add more layers to my background. Now that I've picked the focal point, there are some colors in there that I want to incorporate into the background. So I have this stamp, and I will link it. It's one of the kits, and I can't remember the name, but it'll be in the description box. And I'm putting bright aqua on it with the blending foam and just stamping this very fine detail. It's not an in-your-face detail, but I want to add more interest to my background. And then, of course, when you use acrylic paints with your stamps, you want to always make sure you clean it so that you keep your stamps in good stamping condition for mixed media. Now, the napkin with the bear had some darker blue in it, so I want to incorporate some of that into the background. So I'm using Prussian blue, and this stencil, which is, I believe, called Diamond Plate, and I'm adding that in random places on this page. And again, I've chosen a stencil that is finer, smaller scale. And I'm edging the page with the blue since I have it on the makeup sponge. I might, well, not might, I definitely will be shading around there, edging the page later, but if once I have it on the makeup sponge, I usually do that as well. Now I'm going back to this stamp, and I'm using white. I want to brighten the page a little bit, so I'm using, but I don't want to introduce yet one more pattern, so I'm using the same stamp, or I could have used the same stencil with two different colors. And I'm overlapping where I've stamped, where I've stenciled. Remember, it's all about that layering. And we're cleaning the stamp again. Now I'm ready to cut out the focal image. But I'm not going to make you watch me cut the whole thing out. And once it's cut out, I'm grabbing a blending foam and some black, and I'm going to edge it. This is going to get rid of the white edge. It's also going to shade around the focal image so that it stands out a little bit better. Yes, I'm going to do more shading, but this is a quick way of shading if you don't want to do the other way. It does give that effect. Once that's completely dry, I am going to glue this down, and I decided to grab clear gesso from the Crafter's Workshop to glue this down. I wanted to seal the napkin because I was thinking at this point that I was going to do some colorization of it, and I didn't want it to wick in. I wanted to make sure that it was a non-porous surface. And clear gesso can be used as an adhesive just like gel medium. So this sentiment comes from the Embrace Possibility sentiment pack that's available for purchase at Ninny's Napkins. If you're interested, you can go and check it out. There is a link in the description box. And I could have used it in the rectangular shape, but that blocked off too much of my background, and I didn't want to do that. So I cut it out. And then I am playing with where it looks best. And I decided that it looks better on the lower half. So the top half is all just the pattern, you can see. And then I switch it up. Instead of saying, once you choose hope, all things are possible, I flip the saying to say, all things are possible once you choose hope. So you don't have to use the sentiments as they are exactly. You can play with them, cut out words, use only part. Get the most mileage out of stuff that you have in your stash. And I clean off the excess gel medium or gesso off the brush before I put it in water. That just helps, it makes it easier to clean. So now I'm coming in and I am doing a little bit more shading or edging around the page. And I'm using Prussian blue here. I do come around once that's dry and I do add black. I wanted to see if I really needed to go black, or maybe I was thinking it might be too stark. But because there is gray and black on the bear and the sentiment, it needed the black to work all together. And then once I've shaded or edged the page, I am going to come in and shade with the black on the exterior part of the bear. Again, this helps further make it stand out. The bear is very close in colorization to the background. And if you want the focal image to stand out, when that's the case, you need shading is the way to do that. I love how the fur of the bear, the patterns in the fur, kind of mimic the gesso resist we did with that calm stencil. And I'm just darkening some of the areas, so I am slightly colorizing it. The black areas. Then I'm coming in with some of that magenta. I just want to add a little bit more of that pink. There's so much in the background and there's not a lot on the bear. So I'm just adding some. I'm making everything work together. And it's I thinned it down. It's like a wash, I'm not actually painting it. I was going to do some gold splatters, and I do because there's some gold in the bear and I wanted to introduce that color to the background. But so that I don't have to wait for the splatters to dry, I'm going to outline my sentiment first. And once that's done, then I'm coming in and splattering with the gold. You may know with YouTube, the subscribe button is now underneath the description box. There's a subscribe button. You can hit that if you're not already a subscriber. Once you do that, there is a bell beside it. And if you click on that bell, you will get notified of when I've posted another video. If you're already a subscriber, if there's a line through that bell, that means you don't have notifications turned on, and you may want to do that. That way you won't miss any of my videos. Then I decided I'm going to add some highlights with white on the bear. This is just brightening up that bear. So I'm looking at where the lighter parts are on the napkin, and that's what I'm targeting. So it's really fail-proof. I'm using what the artist has already done to guide me. And I'm just brightening it up a little bit. There are close-ups and shots of the finished page at the end. Click on the iCard if you want to see any links to related videos. As well, at the end of the video, there are end cards that have suggested videos you may be interested in as well. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, go get creative.